Those who wear the mask of morality do so primarily for their own benefit, to control you. While they may show concern for you, their top priority is always their own gain. If you fully believe that their actions are for your benefit, you may eventually pay the price with your life. What I say is not easy to absorb, so watch until the end to truly understand it. Mind Creates Form greets you and your friends in this video. Today, we will decode 3 classic yet incredibly valuable human manipulation techniques that not everyone knows. These methods have been used for centuries to influence and control others. Understanding them will help you recognize when they are being used against you and give you the tools to navigate social and business interactions effectively. Watch them over and over again until they become second nature, so you can master them and never fall victim to manipulation. 1. The moral manipulation technique. Many people like to use the excuse, "I do it for your own good," to carry out moral manipulation and achieve their own personal goals. In relationships, this method is particularly difficult to detect. On the contrary, you may even feel that the other person genuinely has your best interest at heart and start doubting yourself. However, in reality, you are falling into their manipulation trap. When I was 19 years old, I had a girlfriend. After a while, I felt that we were not compatible and wanted to break up. However, my father strongly objected and insisted that I get engaged to her. He told me, "That girl is so good to you, yet you still don't know how to be satisfied. She is devoted to you." He continued, "You don't want to wait and regret it later." My father, who had more life experience, assured me that he was advising me for my own good. "Think for yourself," he said. After listening, I was completely confused and started blaming myself. Was I really being too heartless? Could it be that I didn't know how to cherish her? Fortunately, my father scolded me enough to wake me up. Otherwise, I might have missed what he called a good opportunity. So I told my father that I agreed to the engagement. Very quickly, we held an engagement party in the village, and even the wedding date was set. However, the more I thought about it, the more I felt that something was not right. It was obvious that the two of us had incompatible personalities, so why would breaking up be wrong? Was my father really doing this for my future benefit? Later, I discovered the truth. My father believed that the girl's family was asking for a low dowry, which would save him money. Additionally, if his son married early, his own reputation in the village would be elevated. It was all for his own benefit. He had almost ruined my happiness, but I still calmly insisted on breaking up. When my father found out, he tried using a series of moral restraints to stop me. However, this time, I saw through his trick and remained firm in my decision. Seeing that he had no other way to convince me, my father finally admitted the truth. The other family asked for such a low wedding dowry, and if you break up with her, where will you find someone like that again? Next time, if you meet someone who asks for a higher dowry, you'll have to figure it out on your own. Our family doesn't have that much money." His true intentions were exposed. I smiled and said, "Dad, don't worry. I plan to live alone forever without you spending a penny on me." Many parents and relatives are skilled at using moral control techniques. They say things like, "You have to get married early. Don't be too picky. It will be hard to find someone later." They claim these things are for your benefit, but the real reason is that if you remain single, they will lose face in society. Or they might say, "You shouldn't start a business. There are too many risks. You'll have to invest a lot of money, and what if you lose it? It's better to stay at the company and not make a mess." Again, they frame it as for your own good, but what they truly mean is, you shouldn't start a business because if you fail, you'll come to me asking for money. Moral manipulation is one of the most powerful tools of control. It disguises selfish motives as love and concern, making it difficult to detect. Recognizing these tactics is the first step to breaking free. 2. The technique of manipulating by labeling. People cannot be convinced. They can only convince themselves. You just need to find the manipulation button behind their back, and a simple label can influence their behavior. If you want someone to act a certain way, all you have to do is label them accordingly, and they will gradually conform to that label. In a church, after everyone had finished praying and left, only a little girl remained. The priest approached her and asked where her parents were. The little girl burst into tears and said that they had died in a car accident. The priest paused for a moment and then said, "It seems like you are a child of God." Years later, that little girl became a famous writer, and in her book, she revealed that the priest's words had changed her life. This is the power of labeling. For example, if you want your wife to cook delicious meals every day, all you need to do is praise her as a chef, consistently and enthusiastically. Every time she finishes cooking, whether the dish is good or not, you must praise her. Take photos and videos of the food and share them with friends and family, proudly saying, "My wife is a chef." The more you praise her, the more she will take pride in her cooking, and before long, you will find yourself enjoying delicious meals regularly. Managers must understand how to use labeling to motivate employees. Creating role models in the company is essential. Titles such as Star of Kindness, Achievement Star, Satisfied Service Star, and other accolades should be assigned to employees, and their photos should be displayed on the wall. You will soon notice that those employees whose pictures are on the wall will work harder, with greater enthusiasm and dedication. This technique works in all aspects of life. If someone is stingy, call them generous, and they will start behaving more generously. If a child dislikes studying, tell them repeatedly, especially in front of friends and family, that they love studying. Everyone in this world is an actor. The more applause they receive, the more passionately they perform. Without applause, they lose motivation to act. 3. Emotional manipulation techniques. Over the years, I had two close friends, one of whom we called Big Brother. At some point, Big Brother borrowed money from the other friend and did not repay it for 2 or 3 years. When I found out, I asked my friend why he didn't ask for the money back. He replied, "If I ask Big Brother for the money, I will look stingy." Big Brother always told him, "I consider you my younger brother." This is a typical example of emotional manipulation. By framing the relationship as a brotherly bond, he created a situation where my friend felt guilty about demanding repayment. Since then, I have never engaged in a brotherly relationship with anyone again. People who engage in such tactics should be approached with caution. When dealing with them, only discuss basic emotions, never discuss money. Liu Bang, Liu Bei, and Song Jiang were all masters of emotional manipulation. The techniques they used are quite simple, but extremely difficult to execute successfully. First, talk about emotions with the other party, but never use real emotions. Read this sentence 3 times carefully. People who do not use real emotions are manipulators. People who use real emotions are manipulated. Second, only talk about emotions with people who can bring benefits to you. The moment those benefits stop, the emotional connection must also end immediately. If you cannot master these 2 principles, then do not engage in the emotional manipulation game. Otherwise, you will be the one being manipulated. If you have read this far, consider it a gift from me to the few who have the ability to understand these concepts, because this is the first time I am revealing the connections between Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism in this context. Now, let's reflect on a paradox. We all know that ancient philosophers were far greater than modern thinkers. This is a particularly strange phenomenon. In terms of food, ancient nutrition was not as developed as modern diets. In terms of knowledge, our modern world is far more advanced. Brain evolution? Modern humans have more access to information than ever before. In terms of population, ancient societies consisted of only a few tens of millions of people, whereas today's world holds billions. Under every possible measure, modern humans should surpass ancient ones. And yet, why does it seem that the most outstanding thinkers come from ancient times? Ancient civilizations produced Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Laozi, Confucius, Han Feizi, Mencius, and Guizhou. These brilliant minds shaped the foundations of philosophy, politics, and strategy. In contrast, modern society struggles to produce philosophers of the same caliber. Even today, people around the world seek wisdom from the ancients. So, why do modern people fall short in comparison? To answer this, we need to take a closer look at ancient Asia. Which historical period produced the greatest number of brilliant minds? I think you've already guessed it, the Spring and Autumn Warring States period. Why did this period see an explosion of great thinkers? The answer is simple: war. During this time, hundreds of large and small states were in constant conflict. Every day, rulers sought new ways to outsmart and defeat their enemies. Every strategy, every lesson learned was meticulously recorded, studied, and improved. This was a time of survival through knowledge and strategy. When a society is in turmoil, only the most brilliant minds can rise to the occasion. War forces people to innovate, strategize, and think critically. Great ideas are born from crisis. Now, contrast this with modern times. Why are there fewer great thinkers today? Because we are living in a relatively peaceful era. In times of war, leaders need visionaries and strategists to win battles. In times of peace, society values technological specialists who can refine and optimize existing systems. Now, let's bring this back to the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, a time of explosive intellectual growth. The ideas developed during this time are not just historical artifacts. They remain highly applicable to business, leadership, and power dynamics. So, how can we apply these ancient schools of thought to modern business? To understand that, we need to explore the fundamental principles of Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism. Each of these schools offers a unique approach to governance, management, and influence. Understanding how they shaped history will help you master power and control in today's world. I know that not many people can clearly explain Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism, three schools of thought that have influenced the feudal system for thousands of years. To ensure clarity, I will use the simplest way to explain them so that everyone can grasp their core ideas. You may feel that these schools are vast and complex, making it difficult to determine where to begin. In reality, understanding them is quite simple. These schools are essentially divided into three major categories. Once you understand these three, everything else will fall into place. At the time of their emergence, various schools of thought developed, but they all stemmed from three fundamental doctrines, each representing a different attitude toward tradition. 1. The first group supports tradition, believing that tradition is inherently valuable and must be preserved. 2. The second group rejects tradition, believing that tradition is flawed and should be abandoned. 3. The third group is indifferent to tradition, asking, what is tradition? Is it useful? Does it even matter to me? These three attitudes correspond to Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism. Other schools of thought can be seen as variations of these three main ideologies. Since there are only three possible stances toward tradition, we can also express them in three clearer ways. 1. Confucianism, restoration, and preservation. Confucianism supports restoring and maintaining tradition. Its followers believe that the root cause of societal problems is that people have strayed from traditional values. The solution, according to them, is to return to traditional teachings and moral principles as quickly as possible. Confucianism sees tradition as a guiding force for order and stability. 2. Legalism, reform and rulemaking. Legalism takes the opposite stance. It believes that tradition is an obstacle to progress and that clinging to outdated customs leads to societal decay. Legalists advocate for breaking away from old traditions and instead creating strict laws and new governance systems that will drive society forward. Unlike Confucianism, which emphasizes moral values, legalism prioritizes structure, control, and efficiency. Both Confucianism and legalism are proactive and progressive, but they offer completely opposite solutions. The key reason for this difference lies in their historical and geographical origins. Both philosophies developed in the Central Plains, a densely populated region with complex social structures. In such an environment, governance required an active approach, either by reinforcing moral values, Confucianism, or by enforcing strict rules, legalism. 3. Taoism, withdrawal and non-interference. However, in the more remote and mountainous region of Jingzhou, where the population was sparse, a completely different attitude emerged, one of detachment from the world. Taoism does not concern itself with restoring the past, Confucianism, or creating new laws, legalism. Instead, it suggests leaving the world behind, not in the sense of physically escaping, but in the sense of detaching from worldly concerns. Taoists believe that society is in chaos because people interfere too much. The pursuit of material success and social structure, they argue, only leads to further suffering. Instead of trying to restore the past, Confucianism, or rebuild the future, legalism, Taoism advocates for letting things happen naturally and allowing the universe to take its course. For Taoists, the question of whether tradition is good or bad is irrelevant. They focus instead on personal enlightenment and harmony with nature. Modern applications of these three attitudes. These three approaches, restoring, reforming, and withdrawing, are not just ancient philosophies. Even today, when facing a problem, people often take one of these three approaches. Some believe in preserving traditions to solve problems, Confucianism. Some believe in completely breaking away from old ways and creating new systems, legalism. Some believe in simply stepping back and letting things unfold naturally, Taoism. Understanding these three schools of thought helps us see that all societies, businesses, and governments operate based on one or a combination of these ideologies. The key is knowing when and how to apply them effectively. Next, we will explain in more detail about these three schools. Let's start with Confucianism. Confucius believed in the philosophy of restoration, that is, controlling one's impulses and acting according to the requirements of traditional rituals. He taught that only by strictly following the rituals and customs of the past could people achieve the highest form of virtue and wisdom. However, during the Warring States period, society was in turmoil, wars raged, rituals collapsed, and music became chaotic. In such an era, strictly adhering to rituals seemed rigid and impractical. Confucius traveled from state to state, promoting his ideas, but he was met with little success. The rulers of the time were too preoccupied with military training and warfare to pay attention to ethics and rituals. As a result, Confucius and his followers, including Mencius, struggled to find employment in the courts of the feudal lords. From this, we can draw an important conclusion. Confucianism was not effective during times of war. In a chaotic period where black cat or white cat, as long as it catches mice, it is a good cat, practicality triumphed over ideology. Now, let's look at legalism. From the perspective of legalists, Confucianism was outdated and impractical. To them, the world was in a constant state of conflict. And yet Confucians kept talking about rituals and traditions, which had no real use in war or governance. Legalists argued that times had changed, but Confucians refused to acknowledge it. Instead, Confucians clung to outdated traditions, making them, in the eyes of the legalists, a group of scholars who could not succeed in the real world. A famous story from the legalist school, written by Han Feizi, perfectly illustrates their philosophy. The story tells of a farmer who once saw a rabbit crash into a tree and die. The farmer realized he had found an easy meal, and instead of continuing to work hard, he simply waited by the tree, hoping for another rabbit to come along and crash into it. Han Feizi used this as a metaphor for people who stubbornly rely on outdated methods in a changing world. According to the legalists, trying to govern a country using old traditions was as foolish as waiting for another rabbit to run into the tree. So, what did legalists propose instead? They rejected Confucian rituals and promoted strict laws as the foundation of governance. Their belief was simple: laws should govern society, not outdated customs. During this time, legal reform became a trend among various states. Any state that successfully implemented legalist principles quickly became strong. Historical figures like Song Jiang, Li Kui, Wu Qi, and Shen Buhai emerged as pioneers of these legal reforms. Legalists introduced three fundamental principles of governance, often referred to as the three treasures of legalism. 1. Law. Clear and strict laws must govern society, ensuring that all people, regardless of status, follow the same rules. 2. Tactics. Rulers must use cunning and strategy to control their subordinates and prevent rebellion. 3. Power and authority. The ruler must maintain an unquestionable position of power, ensuring that no one can challenge them. These principles became the foundation of authoritarian rule and were widely adopted by rulers who sought to strengthen their control over their people. Interestingly, legalist advisors were often not welcomed in their own countries. Whether it was Shang Yang or the Li family, many legalist thinkers found opportunities for success in foreign states, rather than their homelands. The reason? Local rulers feared them. Legalist officials were experts in law, manipulation, and governance. If a ruler appointed a legalist official from their own country, that official might gain too much power and become a threat. However, hiring legalist officials from foreign states ensured they had no local alliances and would remain loyal only to the ruler who hired them. Legalists who left their homelands were like drifting rafts, relying entirely on the emperor for survival. This meant they were willing to be completely obedient to the ruler in exchange for power and status. Throughout history, many emperors deliberately recruited legalist advisors from outside their own territories. Why? 1. Foreign legalists had no established power base and were fully dependent on the ruler. 2. Since they had no local connections, they could not form factions or alliances against the emperor. 3. Their deep understanding of law and strategy made them effective tools for governance and control. This is why legalists often became powerful in foreign states rather than their homelands. Their survival depended entirely on serving their ruler without question. While Confucianism sought to restore traditional values, legalism rejected tradition in favor of strict laws and control. Confucianism emphasized rituals and moral virtue, making it ineffective in times of war. Meanwhile, legalism focused on laws, power, and cunning strategies, making it ideal for rulers who sought control over their people. As history unfolded, many rulers alternated between Confucianism and legalism, depending on their needs. Some would use legalist principles to establish power, then switch to Confucian values to maintain stability. Understanding these two schools of thought helps us see why different leadership styles emerge and how governments balance morality with control. You see, many companies, when they want to reform, will seek out outside consulting teams. Why? Because these consultants are not afraid of offending others. They do not work within the company and do not have to face colleagues or relatives. The perspective of Taoism. Next, let's talk about Taoism. Unlike Confucianism and legalism, which focus on moral discipline and strict governance, Taoism takes an entirely different approach. From the Taoist perspective, particularly from Jingzhou, people in the Central Plains are too entangled in unnecessary struggles. Taoists believe that life is limited, so why waste time fighting over fleeting material things? This philosophy of detachment is best illustrated in a famous story by Zhuangzi. The story of Zhuangzi and Huishi Zhuangzi had a friend named Huishi, who was a prime minister in the state of Wei. When Zhuangzi traveled through Wei, he planned to visit Huishi. However, someone warned Huishi that Zhuangzi had come to take his position as prime minister. Hearing this, Huishi panicked and ordered his subordinates to hunt down Zhuangzi throughout the country. For 3 days and 3 nights, Huishi's men searched for Zhuangzi, trying to drive him away. Finally, upon hearing the news, Zhuangzi calmly approached Huishi himself and told him a story. There was once a phoenix flying from the south to the North Sea. On its journey, if there was no parasol tree, it would not stop to rest. If there was no bamboo fruit, it would not eat. If there was no sweet spring water, it would not drink. But on its way, the phoenix encountered an owl that had just picked up a dead mouse. The owl, fearing that the phoenix would steal its mouse, screeched and flapped its wings to scare it away. After telling this story, Zhuangzi looked at Huishi and asked, "Do you really think I want your position as prime minister?" Then, without another word, he turned and left. You must know that Huishi was not an ordinary person. The idiom, having 5 carts of books, was used to describe his immense knowledge and wisdom. So, there is no need to elaborate further on his intelligence. This story alone is enough to illustrate the depth and detachment of Taoism, the Taoist approach to life and leadership. According to Taoism, how should one handle everything in the world? Another well-known Taoist figure, Lao Tzu, would ask in return, what is the worst thing to do? It is people like you, who want to do everything, who blindly believe that by taking action, you can improve the world. But in reality, the world is ruined by people like you. Taoism challenges the need for constant intervention. It teaches that the best solution is often to do nothing at all, to let things unfold naturally. According to this philosophy, when the world and its people are allowed to operate freely, everything will naturally improve. Look at nature. For thousands of years, it has existed without anyone managing it. Yet, it remains perfectly balanced. This is the Taoist principle of non-action, Wu Wei, a belief that governance and leadership should be done with minimal interference, allowing systems and people to flow naturally. For thousands of years, China and its neighboring countries have been governed through a combination of Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism. Understanding how these 3 ideologies shaped empires can help us apply them effectively in business and leadership today. How were these ideologies applied in history? To understand how Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism shaped governance, we must study historical dynasties, particularly the Warring States period, 475 to 221 BC. During this time, hundreds of small and large nations fought for dominance, including the 7 major states: Qi, Chu, Zhao, Yan, Han, Wei, and Qin. Eventually, Qin Shi Huang defeated the others and unified China. Now, let's explore why Qin was able to accomplish this unification. Why did legalism prevail? During the Warring States period, wars became massive in scale. For rulers, improving their country's military strength was the top priority. In choosing an ideological system, kings had to ask, which philosophy, Confucianism, legalism, or Taoism, can best enhance our military effectiveness? The answer was clear: legalism. Confucianism was too conservative, focusing on tradition and morality rather than power. Taoism was too detached, advocating for non-interference and individual freedom. Legalism, however, was highly practical, emphasizing strict laws, discipline, and absolute control, which made it perfect for war and national expansion. Legalist thinkers told rulers that tradition was outdated. Change was necessary. If a nation wanted to thrive, it had to reform. Legalism's revolutionary reforms. Before legalist reforms, social status was determined by birth. Nobles remained nobles for generations. Peasants remained poor indefinitely. This system failed to inspire ambition among the lower class. Why would commoners work hard if they could never change their fate? Legalist thinkers proposed a radical idea. Social status should not be determined by lineage, but by merit. This meant soldiers could rise in rank based on the number of enemies they defeated. The aristocracy lost their inherited privileges unless they proved their worth. Commoners had an incentive to fight harder and contribute more to society. This meritocratic system created a highly motivated army and an efficient administration, allowing Qin to rise above all other states and unify China. At this point, you should understand why the debate between the schools was eventually won by the legalists. However, after Qin unified the world, they continued to apply legalist policies, and yet their empire collapsed within just 10 years. Why did this happen? The answer is simple. Qin implemented Song Jiang's reforms with a primary focus on war. To put it bluntly, their entire system was built on conquest. They plundered other nations to sustain their government. But once Qin had unified China, there were no more external enemies to plunder. Yet, the imperial court still needed money, and the officials still needed merit to advance. With no foreign enemies left, the only ones left to exploit were their own people. This resulted in severe oppression and excessive taxation, leading to rebellion and the dynasty's swift collapse. Thus, the mighty Qin dynasty fell within just 2 generations. The rise of the Han dynasty. After Qin's fall, Xiang Yu, the overlord of Western Chu, seized power. However, instead of consolidating the empire, he divided the territory among various warlords. This decision was a fatal mistake. Can you imagine? He had just defeated Qin, and instead of ruling China, he created new warlords who would inevitably fight for power again. For warlords, legalist principles work. Why? Because they can justify plundering other states for their own survival. But as we all know, this cycle of war and plunder could not last. Eventually, Liu Bang emerged victorious and reunified China, establishing the Han dynasty. Here's something every leader should remember. Legalism can be used to conquer the world, but it cannot be used to rule the world. This is a lesson from history. You can quickly conquer a nation with power and strict discipline, but you cannot govern it long-term with fear alone. After unifying China, Liu Bang knew that if he continued to follow Qin's strict legalist policies, he would meet the same fate as Qin Shi Huang. So, he abandoned the legalist ideology and took a different approach. But why Taoism? Let's analyze this decision. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, was born into wealth. His empire was built on the power accumulated by his ancestors. And once he became emperor, No one in the country dared to challenge him. This allowed him to rule with absolute authority and impose harsh legalist policies without resistance. Let's look back at Liu Bang. Before he rose to power, he was a commoner who fought alongside a group of brothers to conquer the world. Strictly speaking, Liu Bang and his brothers were not in a superior subordinate relationship. Instead, they functioned more like partners. Unlike Qin Shi Huang, who held absolute authority over his empire, Liu Bang did not have overwhelming power over his men. So why did Liu Bang choose Taoist Wu Wei, ruling by doing nothing? Because he had no other choice. After becoming emperor, he also divided 2 or 3 territories among his trusted partners. At this point, many people might wonder, why was Xiang Yu destroyed for dividing power among warlords, while Liu Bang successfully divided power and remained in control? The answer lies in the strategy behind their decisions. Liu Bang's division of territories was only a temporary measure. Unlike Xiang Yu, who created new warlords and failed to keep them under control, Liu Bang inherited and improved upon the Qin administrative system. For example, Song Jiang, a major reformer of the Qin dynasty, once established a law stating that if 2 adult men lived in the same household without separating, their taxes would be doubled. Villages had to consist of people with different surnames. Those of the same surname were not allowed to live together. These policies were designed to break down large clans into smaller family units, making it harder for warlords to organize powerful resistance forces against the central government. This system was crucial for controlling power. By dividing and weakening large groups, the Qin rulers ensured that no warlord or noble family could amass too much power and threaten the emperor. The fundamental reason why the Han Dynasty lasted for hundreds of years was that they adopted many of Qin's administrative policies. This strategy is often called the Han inherited the Qin system. So, what lesson can modern leaders learn from this? When the power of your subordinates grows, you must actively weaken and divide that power. By doing so, you prevent any one person from becoming strong enough to challenge your authority. In reality, Liu Bang's decision to rule using Taoist principles, Wu Wei, was not a choice. It was a last resort. He did not have absolute power like Qin Shi Huang, so he had to temporarily adopt a more passive approach to maintain stability among his powerful allies. However, as history shows, he later worked to consolidate power and eliminate potential threats, ensuring that the Han Dynasty would thrive for centuries. Indeed, after ascending the throne, Liu Bang spent 8 years gradually eliminating all the warlords who could threaten his rule. When the empire had just emerged from years of war, the people were exhausted, and it was time to focus on recovery. At that moment, Liu Bang adopted the Taoist method of Wu Wei, ruling through non-action, to provide a period of rest and stability. Simply put, everyone is tired. I will not be too strict anymore. Take a few decades to recover, but even as you rest, you must still work hard to develop the economy. This approach allowed the empire to heal, and indeed, after a few decades, China entered its first era of great peace and prosperity, known as the Wenjing era. People soon realized that in certain special circumstances, less governance could actually be the best form of governance. However, when Han Wudi, Emperor Wu of Han, ascended the throne as the 7th emperor of the Han Dynasty, the empire had changed. Han Wudi was a brilliant and ambitious ruler, one of the most talented and far-sighted emperors in Chinese history. For him, the Taoist approach of Wu Wei was no longer suitable. Faced with 2 ideological choices, Confucianism or legalism, Han Wudi had to make a critical decision. We all know that legalism had already led to the downfall of the Qin dynasty. If he chose to govern strictly through laws, harsh punishments, and absolute control, he would risk facing the same fate. Thus, the best choice was Confucianism. From this decision, Han Wudi launched the famous policy of abolishing all schools and solely exalting Confucianism, making it the official state ideology. From that point onward, for nearly 2,000 years, Chinese emperors followed a dual governance strategy, commonly known as outer Confucianism, inner legalism, yang Confucianism, yin legalism. What does this mean? The state publicly promoted Confucian values, such as the 3 bonds and 5 constants, humanity, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust, to ensure that the people remained obedient and followed strict social hierarchies. However, behind the scenes, the actual governing system was still deeply rooted in legalist principles. For the emperor, legalism was essential for controlling officials, maintaining order, and strengthening the state, while Confucianism served to comfort and guide the people, ensuring stability. Achieve 2 goals at the same time. This is the key to successful management. If you have followed this far, you should already have the answer. If you want to manage a team effectively, you need to pursue Confucianism on the surface, but in reality, apply legalist principles within the organization. When you are in the startup stage, do not overcomplicate things. Simply apply the legalist ideology. Look at how the Qin dynasty operated. In the early stages, it focused entirely on efficiency, execution, and control. You should do the same. In this critical period of development, you must collect money aggressively and maximize output. There should not be too many rules or restrictions, allowing your team members to fully utilize their individual talents. As the famous saying goes, it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice, it is a good cat. Survival is the priority. Before worrying about ethics, structure, or culture, the company must stay alive and grow first. Once your company grows large, with hundreds of thousands of employees, things change. If every employee has their own agenda and personal ambitions, internal conflict will be inevitable and rebellion will not be far away. There is an old saying, a soldier who does not want to become a general is not a good soldier. But have you ever thought about it this way? If every soldier wants to become a general, wouldn't that general be terrified? As an organization expands, the most critical aspect is execution. Not creativity, not individuality, but obedience and efficiency. Take KFC as an example. The process of frying potatoes, cooking chicken wings, and controlling oil temperature is highly standardized. This kind of work requires strict compliance, not individual thinking. If every employee starts thinking creatively and tries to do things their own way, the company's ability to execute will collapse. By studying history, we can extract key lessons to apply to modern business management. 1. Taoist ideology is only useful in special circumstances. Historically, the only time Taoist principles worked was during peaceful periods, such as the Wenjing era. For business owners, Taoism is not practical. It is too passive and lacks structure. 2. Confucianism is crucial for team cohesion. Confucian values help create a sense of unity and discipline among employees. Think of Confucianism as the corporate culture that ensures order and obedience in the workplace. 3. Legalism is essential for business development. No matter what, businesses always have competitors and external threats. At any time, you must apply legalist principles, control, incentives, and strict discipline to stay ahead. The only way to make a company truly strong and powerful is by implementing Confucianism on the outside, legalism on the inside. This means Externally, promote Confucian values to keep employees motivated and aligned with company culture. Internally, apply legalist principles to maintain order, discipline, and efficiency in operations. By mastering this balance, your business will not only survive, but dominate the competition,